So this brings us to section 2 of the course. Now section 1 was pretty much our warm-up section, where I've presented you now with quite a breadth of information, quite a few big ideas. Some of them might just have made sense to you, others you might still be wrestling with just a little bit. Listen, the ideas I'm going to be presenting with you throughout this course, and many of which I've drawn from the likes of Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis, they're not commonly embraced cultural ways of looking at life, hence the reason CBT has been defined as one of the most high impact forms of helping or therapy, and still is pretty much in the world to date. But in this section I want to now go a little bit more theoretical on you, because knowledge builds upon knowledge, ideas build upon ideas, so all of the ideas I'm presenting in this course, yes, some of them might be new to me, but they're not new to the world at large. There is nothing new underneath the sun. We're all learning from someone. All right, so what I want to do now is give reference to some of the thinkers who actually influenced the great minds of the likes of Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis. So here I want to present you with an interesting developmental theory by a gentleman named Jean Piaget. Now, he was born in 1896 and died in 1980. And what you'll find with many of these psychological lay-based thinkers and some of these psychiatry-based theorists, they're funny-looking fellows, all right? But I'm guessing that's what studying the mind can do to a person after a number of years. I'm hoping that I managed to maintain my good looks moving forward in the future. But he had some fantastic ideas, and this is probably one of Jean's most popular theory. Now remember, a theory is just a theory. A theory is not a fact. It's just an interpretation of an aspect of life. That's all theory is, all right? And this is actually one of the main problems in some of the modern psychologies today. Some people look at theories as if they are facts or universal truths, but they're not. They're just theories. All right, I could theorise that because the cows are standing up in the field at the back of my house, that it's going to rain tomorrow. But that's just theory. I mean, if the cows have been standing up in the past, historically, the day before a rainstorm, then it would make sense why I would surmise that it might be about to rain tomorrow. And this is all that theories are. They're just well-informed ideas, but not always necessarily facts. So one of Jean Piaget's theories was this: the stages of cognitive development. All right. Now, obviously, this is quite relevant in the context of this course, looking at how it is that we develop as human beings cognitively, all right? Not behaviorally, not psychoanalytically, just cognitively in terms of our minds. So what Jean Piaget says, well, this is one of his most famous quotes possibly. The main goal of education should be to create mature adults who are confident in learning how to solve problems for themselves instead of repeating what other generations have historically done for them. Now, here in the UK, and what's true in the UK here is true for many other parts of the world, do you know what age, generally going back around about 250 years ago, a boy would become a man? Well, if we look at today's common culture, you have the childhood years, which perhaps lead a child from the age of newborn up till 12 plus, around about 13. Then today, from the age of 13 to 19, we have this generation who are referred to as teenagers or adolescents. And sometimes, teenager-itis or adolescence can carry and remain with a person throughout their 20s and sometimes even into their 30s. This avoidance of responsibility is certainly rife throughout society today, especially in much of the Western world. But back then, a boy became a man at the age of 13 years old. All right. Now, these were kind of back in the days of pastoral societies, all right, before industry, before the Industrial Revolution, which ultimately gave birth to the educational institution that we'll find in society today: school, high school, colleges, universities, all of which is geared to pretty much prepare people for employment. not necessarily geared to prepare people to live wise, mature, and well-adjusted lives. So you can have some really smart, really intellectual 15, 16, 17-year-olds who can carry themselves in a fantastic debate and give voice to all the brilliant theories and opinions and worldviews that they have, whilst having absolutely zero common sense and not even knowing how to fend for themselves or provide for themselves or pay their own way in life. All right, big difference between being, intellectually strong and being grounded in life. And this is what makes this theory, this idea, quite an interesting one, especially as we explore the earlier years of development that children go through up until the age of around about 12 to 13 years old. What Jean Piaget suggested that between the ages of 0, newborn, to 2 years old, human beings go through this sensory motor phase. Now, these are some complex words. Let me explain what this means. This is just simply where little people, i.e. little bambinos, explore the world through senses and actions. That's all they have. I mean, how many 2-year-olds or 1-year-olds have you had an intellectual debate with? That's right, not too many, right? Children haven't yet gone through the full process of language acquisition throughout these years of their life. So what they're doing, they're responding to movements, to actions. All they know how to do is generally scream or make noise when they want something. They're not actually able to, at this stage of the development, give voice to that which they actually want, all right? So this is where, especially from a parenting perspective, physical touch and contact and emotional connection and, speaking and good communication and connection is really important. If a child doesn't experience this, especially throughout those years of their life, they can end up struggling to connect with people right throughout their lives. All right, and they'll never know why. All right, throughout these years of our development, these are the unconscious learning years. So it's not like little babies are, waking up in a day and saying, right, what am I going to learn today? How am I going to make sense of my experience? They just learn how to be. They learn how to respond to other people's interactions, and all of this is done on an unconscious level. And this is why. It's absolutely crucial that as cognitive behavioural therapists, we're never reviewing a person or analysing a person in response to their behaviours. Why? Because more often than not, a person's behaviours spawn out of an unconscious set of learnings that they developed back way earlier on in life. So between the ages of 2 to 7 years old, and apologies if this doesn't read, I'm just seeing this isn't the clearest. So in the additional materials section, we'll embed a resource that you can do a bit more study on this idea if you want to. So pre-operational, that's the ages of between 2 and 7 years old. This represents and refers to objects and events with words or images. And this is where we start assigning labels onto things. All right? Mummy smiles at me. Mummy's good. Daddy frowns sometimes. That is bad. So throughout these years of life, this is when we're starting now to assign meaning onto things. If mummy doesn't give me what I want, mummy is bad. When mummy gives me everything that I want, mummy is good. And we start to define and decide throughout these years of our life what's good, what's bad. We start to get a sense for what's right, what's wrong. But again, I'm not saying this is set or cast in stone, because if a person doesn't have a strong upbringing, doesn't have strong, mature, wise parents, and strong, grounded, mature, wise parents are kind of few and far between throughout society today, aren't they? Then this can really result in a young person really not developing at the rate that perhaps others might of the same or a similar age. So, moving on. Between the ages of 7 to 11 years old, concrete operational, a fascinating phase. This is where people are now starting to reserve their thinking. They're not just going to call a spade a spade. They're not just going to say what pops into their mouth. They're going to reserve, hold back just a little bit, concrete operational. We want to operate and function out of something that's a bit more substantial than just our initial first thoughts or our automatic responses. We're not necessarily just going to say a person's bad because we don't get what we want right away, we might now start asking why. Is there something going on behind this action? We start getting a little bit more alert and becoming a little bit more aware to life, and that people are growing and developing and learning in the same way that we are. So we start becoming a bit more grounded in our learning throughout this phase of life. We also start developing really concrete memories now as well throughout these years. Like in the sensory motor years and the pre-operational years, these years, yes, we might be starting to develop some grounded unconscious learnings, but it's through these years here now that we start relating events that we're experiencing today back to earlier events that we've had throughout those previous years. So we start making connections, start making links now. And this is where the meanings that we assign onto events become a bit more grounded and can sometimes become a little bit more challenging to work with and modify. So it goes without saying that how well and positively influenced a child is through the earlier stages of their life kind of really does have a massive impact on how mature and grounded they go on to become in the latter years of their life. So 12 plus, formal, operational. This is where people now start using abstract reasoning about hypothetical events, situations. They consider logical possibilities and systematically examine test hypotheses. Have you ever known a 10, 11, 12-year-old to say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Come on, little Jimmy, you've got to get out of bed and go to school. Why? I don't want to. It's where they start to question absolutely everything. Well, these are the formal operational years. They have a hypothesis about life. They're starting to work things out for themselves, but obviously they've got a whole lot of voids in their understanding. Now, this is just a theory, right? It's just one way of looking at life. It's not set in stone or anything. But if you look at this and then consider what I was talking about just at the start of the video, that at the age of 13 years old, this is when, girls would become women and boys became men back in, pastoral times before the Industrial Revolution, and everything became about money, industry, capitalism, make more money, get more stuff, go through school, get as many certificates as you can, then go and hopefully find a job. And boys became men at the age of 13. Why? Because they were now starting to think and reason for themselves. All right, and this is where you could put a young person in a more challenging situation and they'd actually be ready to start resolving and start working through problems for themselves without necessarily being led or held by the hand. So going back in days of old, in ancient or near Eastern, so in some Near Eastern cultures, what would happen on a boy's 13th birthday? He would get taken out by some of the elders of a community out on the hunt, all right? And then he'd be left to fend for himself, all right? It's right, okay, I want you to go and bring back a boar to provide for the family. So the young man was now given a task, and sometimes it was kind of sink or swim. Learn to fend for yourself. It's time for you to become a man, to take full responsibility, not just for yourself, but also for your community or for your family. And 9 times out of 10, obviously the guilt and the shame that would walk hand in hand with failure was sometimes more than enough to probe a young person to succeed by whatever means necessary. Interesting ideas, all right? Obviously, as a nation of human beings, as a global community of human beings, we have evolved, we've changed. Some days today, or in some cultures, you'll have men and women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and even the 50s, and they still haven't grown up. They still haven't taken responsibility for themselves, all right? But remember, maturity has got less to do with a person's age and more to do with their acceptance of responsibility. And sometimes some people have never had the opportunity to learn to take responsibility for themselves. Why? Possibly because of a parent or a role model or a guardian who was overprotective or over-nurturing or controlling or manipulative by nature. What I'm saying is there are infinite factors and reasons why we all find ourselves at different levels and stages in our cognitive development. But this is one framework that we can use just to get a grasp of how it is that young people, children especially, learn and grow and develop cognitively. So I just want to give you an overview here. I could talk about this for hours, but there's not much more to it than this. In the videos that follow, I want to share with you a few more theories, a few more perspectives, so that you can start working things out for yourself. So just see if you can get a vision for how it is that the people that you know in your life might have developed and cognitively evolved over the years. All right, this can give you a framework and a baseline understanding on where it is that you might want to start working with people as a cognitive behavioural therapist. So in the additional materials section, we've put together just a mini fact sheet, just with this theory broken down in a bit more depth. If you do want to do a bit more study, a bit more research, there's loads of information on Jean Piaget online as well. If not, I shall see you again in the next clip.